everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And in today's video, I'm going to be chopping up my pink princess philodendron and showing you some of the ways that you can propagate them. As I've mentioned before, one of my friends is currently very kindly looking after quite a lot of my plants for me, just until I'm able to move and get a bit more space. And he called me the other day in an absolute panic saying, something's happening to one of your plants. I don't know what it is. Its leaves are falling off. I don't know what to do. And yeah, it was my pink princess philodendron. So looking at her, you can tell that her leaves are kind of starting to turn in places. She's just really not looking very healthy. If you look at the base of the stem just there, you can see that she's actually started to rot. So this is why it's happening. But I thought it was a good excuse to chop her up, hopefully make some lovely new little baby plants and yeah, show you how I do it as I go. I'm going to propagate her a couple of different ways, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So I'm going to start off by lighting a candle, not just to set the mood for this video, but also because we're going to use it to seal the stems once we've cut them. I have got a little kind of, it's an oil burner actually, but you can use it for wax melts and stuff like that. And I just let the wax on top kind of go all nice and melted, and then we can use that shortly. So yeah, I'm just going to put that to one side and then I'm going to start chopping her. So you want to make sure that you've got a really, either pruning shears or scissors, but just make sure they're really clean, because if you use dirty ones, bacteria and nasty stuff can make your cutting rot, make it very unhealthy and not grow very well. So yeah, a very clean pair of scissors. And if you can see on that camera, these little bumpy things here are called nodes, and you basically just want to make sure that any part of the plant you're cutting has a node on it. That is so important, because they're the bits where your roots are going to grow from. I've actually got a Philodendron melanochrysum cutting here to show you, just because this one's been propagating for a while, and you can see all the areas where the roots have grown from. And that's literally just from the nodes. So yeah, your cutting won't grow without nodes. So that is very important. So I'm gonna start at the top. The other thing I was gonna say is some people might choose to wear gloves because the sap of this plant is bright red. It's also, I'm pretty sure, toxic. So that's something to bear in mind. I'm not gonna wear gloves, but you might wanna do that. My first cutting, I've obviously got this little new growth point here at the top. I'm just trying to work out if I wanna do that as a separate cutting to that one. Yeah, I think I'm going to. So I'm going to cut just below the nodes there. So you can see there's kind of about 3-4 centimeters, millimeters, sorry. So that bit has nodes on it. So there we go. That is our first little cutting. And I'm just going to pop that to one side. And then I'm going to do the same here again. So make sure it's got nodes on it. And I'm going to cut just here in the middle of the stem so that my next cutting also has nodes. Oh yeah, I don't know if you can see the colour of that sap. I'll show you. It is, honestly, it's almost like beetroot. It's so beautiful, but it is bright red and will definitely stain your clothes. Look at that. So that is our second cutting. Just pop that to one side. And I'm basically just going to go down the whole plant and do the same. There is a section here that you can see that has got nodes and doesn't have a leaf on it. I'm still gonna cut this section because this can still produce a new plant, and I'll show you how when we get to it. So again, just underneath, there we go. So this is, people call it either kind of a chonk or a wet stick. That is what we're going to use to propagate in a different way. So again, we'll pop that one to one side. And now this bit here, this big section, actually doesn't have many nodes at all. It's got this aerial roots here, and from my experience with philodendrons, aerial roots don't tend to produce roots. I mean, I know they can, and I've done it with other types of plants like monsteras. They do tend to produce roots, but the only nodes this one's got is way down here. So I think I'm gonna have to chop this one slightly lower and do a very big propagation here. It's a little bit risky because obviously the more foliage it's got to support when it's propagating, the more energy the plant's going to need to kind of support that. So it kind of makes it a bit risky, but I don't really have another choice. So yeah, I'm going to chop just, I don't know if you can see, there's a node just there. I'm going to chop just below that and take quite a big cutting here. So that is absolutely huge, but it does have some more nodes on it down here and there as well. So I'm thinking that will probably be absolutely fine. But yeah, now we're just left with the last two little bits. Again, there's a little bit of stem here that has got some aerial roots on it, so I'm going to just have to be very careful not to harm this leaf, but I'm going to try and just chop that little bit out. That might not be big enough to take, but it's worth a try. And then the last bit here, again, just making sure that there are nodes on there. There's a couple of little nodes on there, so I think it should be all right. And this main bit of the plant, obviously, this is going to need some attention, but I'm going to deal with that either later in this video or off camera. I'm just going to focus on propagating for now, but I'm going to leave that because I'm hoping it will be savable and I will be able to get another plant out of this one as well. So I'm going to just pop that to one side. And here, so let's start with just the normal leaf cuttings because these are probably going to be the easiest. I'm just going to kind of wait a few minutes for the sap to kind of stop oozing out quite so dramatically. And then we're going to use the wax from the candle just to seal the ends of the stems. You can also use like a hot frying pan or something like that. Some people sear the ends, and yeah, you can do that. I personally have always used wax, but there's no reason you couldn't do the other way. The reason we do this basically is just because if you don't seal the ends when it's propagating, it can start to rot, like the ends can start to rot, and that can mean that your cutting will fail, it will die, it'll essentially just rot away. So it's really, really a good idea. You don't have to, like, for example, with some plant cuttings when propagating Syngonium or Pothos or even Monstera, sometimes I don't bother sealing the ends, but these ones are quite sensitive plants, and if you want to give them the best chance, I would say seal the ends. So yeah, now that you can see the sap has kind of died off a bit, it's not kind of pouring out anymore, I'm just gonna literally dip, obviously not getting the nodes on it, but just dip my end here into the wax just to create a nice little seal. You see that? And yeah, I'm just gonna wait a moment for that to dry, and then I'm just gonna do it one more time or a couple more times just to make sure it's kind of properly sealed and no water is gonna get into that bit. There we go, so that's the bottom one done. That should now be safe from rotting. The top one here, I mean, there's a couple of things you could do. Obviously, you could just suspend, I'm going to propagate this first one in water, and you could just suspend it in water just kind of above the nodes, but below the point where it could rot. But to be on the safe side, I think I'm just going to try and, like, obviously it's a bit of a difficult angle, but just try and seal this top bit as well, just to make sure that it's just a little bit more safe, and then I can just put the whole thing in water and not worry too much. So yeah, here we go. And again, just wait. Cool, so there you can see all of the nodes are still exposed, so they are good to go. And these bits here have been sealed, so they're very unlikely to rot. So as I say, with this one, I'm gonna just propagate it in water. So it is literally as simple as, similarly to what I've done with this one here, just getting some water and popping your cutting into it. What I always do when I'm propagating in water is I will either use distilled water. This actually isn't distilled, this is just normal tap water, but I'll either use distilled water or I'll just allow the water to kind of sit out for a little bit before I put my cuttings in. Like, I filled my jars last night so that basically any like chlorine or any chemicals in the water or anything like that have time to evaporate and won't affect your plants negatively. Also, something that I am going to do for this one, I don't often do this, but I'm going to use some rooting hormone. You basically just put this around the nodes of your plants where the roots are going to form, and it helps to retain moisture and just encourage them to root healthily. So yeah, I haven't used this in ages actually, so I'm going to do it today. You can just dip your cutting in. I always use a little brush and kind of brush it on, but yeah, it smells disgusting, but it is good stuff. I'll leave the link to it in the description box if anybody wants to try it. But yes, I'm just gonna pop some rooting hormone onto the nodes. Get it on nice and thick. And then yeah, I'm just gonna pop my cutting into water and wait. In order to make sure that you're cutting roots really well and as fast as possible, it's best to keep it in kind of a pretty bright spot, not direct sun, but what's known as bright indirect light. So just an area that receives lots of natural light, but not too much direct sun itself. And also to make sure that it's not too cold, because that is something that can completely stop or hinder propagating plants. I don't know why I always speak so weirdly when I'm filming. I'm pretty sure I don't speak like that. Hinder. Maybe I do, who knows? But yeah, that is what I'm gonna do with this one. I'm gonna leave it in this room because this room receives great natural light. It's north facing though, so it doesn't get too much sun. And I'm just gonna keep it nice and warm, probably around 20 degrees if possible, 20 to 25, I would say. But yeah, that one I would say should hopefully start to develop roots in the next week or two. And then you wanna wait until they're a couple of inches long before you go ahead and pot them up. But I will maybe make a video on potting up cuttings soon. But yeah, that is that one done. So I'm gonna pop that one to one side. And then this big one, what do I do with this? I think I'm gonna try the same with this. I think I'm gonna try just propagating this one in water because I can't really chop it up anymore without losing these kind of higher leaves. Because as you can see, there's no nodes there at all. So I'm hoping this one will take. But I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to just seal the ends with some wax and then literally do exactly the same thing again and pop it into water. As I say, if you've got the option to take smaller cuttings than this, I would really, really recommend it just because it does give them a much better chance of actually rooting and becoming fuller plants. I'm really hoping that I don't lose this one because obviously it's a beautiful, beautiful cutting, but it is bigger than I would usually recommend propagating in one go. And to be honest, I don't really need to seal that top one just because that bit's not going to be in water at all. So I'm just going to leave that. But again, I am going to add some rooting hormone onto the nodes as well as the aerial roots as well, just to give it a little bit of a better chance. Yeah, there we go. Just leave this in a nice, warm, bright spot and hope that, fingers crossed, it is absolutely fine. But as I say, I will keep you updated with this one. So with these little bits, I'm going to propagate them slightly differently. I'm actually going to do them in I'm going to make up a little propagation box. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing and just seal the ends of them like I did before. So yeah, just seal them with the wax. And the thing to look for with these is, as well as the nodes that you can see there, they've also got a little growth point, which often on, like for example, on this one, you almost can't see it. I don't know if you can see that on camera. You almost can't see it. It's so tiny. It almost just looks like a little eye or something. But that is where your new growth will come from. So as well as making sure that the nodes are kind of in the moss that we're going to use, you also need to make sure that the growth point's pointing up, because that will mean that it can grow up and become a nice new plant. So yeah, I've literally just got a Tupperware box with some sphagnum moss in it. I rehydrated this before I filmed, but it's great stuff. I love propagating in sphagnum moss. I do also sometimes use perlite, so you could also use a perlite propagation box for this. Some people do also like to use soil and essentially plant straight into the soil instead of perlite or sphagnum moss or anything like that. I have tried this before, but to be honest, I haven't had a very high success rate with it. So I would personally, from my experience, recommend using sphagnum moss or perlite. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop my little thing straight into the middle of it. And I'm just going to make sure that the growth point there, the little nubbiny bit, is exposed, and the nodes are covered with sphagnum moss. You don't have to kind of completely submerge them. That doesn't matter too much, because what's going to happen is basically when this box is closed, it's essentially going to create its own little microclimate, like a tiny little greenhouse, and that will encourage the nodes to sprout. So I'm going to just lay that one in there for now, and I'm going to do the same one with this other tiny one. I don't know how likely it is for this other one to actually do anything, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. So yeah, again, exactly the same thing. And I can see on this one that the growth point, the tiny growth point, is actually right above one of the only two nodes. There's none on that side. So what I'm going to have to do is just kind of not bury this, but just kind of make sure it's quite well covered. It's almost like planting a little seed. Pretty much what it is, isn't it? So yeah, once I've got them in there, I'm just going to give them a spray with some water just to get the moss around there really nice and damp, not like soaking, but just nice and damp. And then again, when they start propagating, the water from this will kind of evaporate and create lots of moisture in there. Humidity really, really helps with propagation. It really helps to kind of encourage the process. So even actually if you're propagating in water, I would say make sure the environment's nice and humid. So I'm just going to pop the lid on that and make sure it's really, really tightly sealed. And what I like to do with propagating in my propagation boxes is I'll use a heat mat. I've showed you it before in other videos. It's from Dr. Grow, the one that I personally use. And it basically just really helps to speed up the propagation process. It keeps the temperature nice and stable, and heat is just fantastic for propagation anyway. So yeah, I'm going to put that on my heat mat under my grow lights and just wait for a while until I notice stuff start to happen. Again, if you don't have grow lights, natural light is absolutely fine. Just something fairly bright, not too direct, is a really good idea. But yeah, propagation boxes really love heat. The one thing you do just have to watch out for, and again, this is why I always seal the ends of my stems with wax, is that because obviously it's a warm, humid environment, although that is fantastic for propagation, it can also mean they're quite prone to rotting. So keeping an eye on your propagation boxes regularly is a really good idea. I had one propagation box a while ago and one of my little chunks started to rot and I didn't notice it in time. And before I knew it, everything in there started to rot as well. So yes, keep an eye on it. But I'm gonna pop this under my grow lights and wait for, I want to say about 3 weeks before it starts kind of doing anything major. But at this time of year, it's going to be slightly slower because of the climate, but I'll wait and see. I'll let you know. So again, as I said before, it's really important to wait until the roots are at least a few inches long. Again, I'm going to use my melanochrysum as an example. You can see that it's rooting really nicely, but again, this one is not ready to be potted up yet. If you do pot it up too soon, you just risk sending your cutting into shock, and it will have gone through that whole long propagation process and you might have failed and it might start rotting. You might have to start all over again. So yeah, I would say this one I'll probably leave in water for another 2-3 weeks and just see how it gets on. But with these ones, I'm hoping they might start to root in the next couple of weeks, and I wouldn't say they'd probably be ready to be potted up for at least a month, but I'll keep you updated. If you don't follow me on Instagram, this isn't like a plug, but follow me and I will post regular updates on them and yeah, keep you in the loop with that. But I really hope this was useful. This wasn't a video that I was planning on doing today at all. I just got this philodendron back from my friend and thought, hey, I'll make a little propagation video. So I really hope it was useful. And yeah, if it was, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video.